I have to review. This is weird. This is so weird.
Is it throwing you off?
You might have to like turn me up a smidge.
You want me to?
Yeah, in my ears.
Yeah, your volume's really low. Your headphones must
They got all that low impedance or something.
Yeah. Let me know.
This is good. Do you know what the impedance on these is?
No, not offhand.
You don't have all of your headphone impedances memorized,
No,
Daniel?
No, I don't.
I can't actually remember. I think mine's like only like 20 ohms or something like that.
I mean, those are not like high quality headphones, but they're comfortable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to second guess that one too.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you are.
My DT770s are pretty nice.
Well, if you want to bring them and use them, you're welcome to.
Sick burn. Okay, I'll stop complaining. These are perfectly fine, Daniel, and I appreciate you letting me borrow your spare headphones because of my absent-mindedness.
Yeah, you could use wired AirPods if you want, but, it'd be terrible.
You've
done it before.
Mm-hmm, I do. I got my backup headphones right in there.
Yeah.
I'm still reading through these notes here. You know what we're talking about?
Vaguely. My guess is cameras and camera gear.
Yeah, this is a NikonCast.
Uh-huh. I saw. There's a lot of Nikon stuff.
I didn't necessarily mean for it to be a NikonCast, but I was like, I don't really want to like do too much research on this stuff here and blah, blah, blah. And then by the time it was over, I was like, well, I guess our palette cleanser is a NikonCast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody ever really plans a NikonCast or if it just happens to them.
It just happens.
Yeah, I think that's what happened here.
It just happens. Yep, I'm adding one more thing. This is probably going to be a real short show. Real short one today.
You think so?
Yeah, mostly because I was just really scraping together topics.
I don't know. You've got some pretty deep Nikon discussion to talk about. So that could take a while.
I started going back and reading some DP review forums.
Oh.
And that's the level of camera nerdery that I want in this podcast.
Yes.
Yowza.
I'm glad the DP review forums are still here. There was that big thing where we thought it was all going away, and I'm glad that site still exists.
I am also glad that it's still there because those people really care about camera technology.
Yes, they do.
And just like, I'm like, how I don't have this much time. How do you have this much time? That's my main takeaway.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember this one guy's name. It kind of matters.
Oh, it's probably very important to him.
Well, he probably listens to this podcast.
That's true.
It was Horshack. Okay, got it.
Now you know.
With an H. Like Rorschach, but with an H. Anyways, right. So, pre-show, unless that was a pre-show, who knows?
Who knows? Anything could happen.
Anything could happen. You sent me so many links today that I thought you were trying to like bait me into a segment.
I mean, I'm not going to say I wasn't.
It was enough links that I was like, Daniel wants to do Daniel's link that he sent me this week.
Sometimes I just see interesting things and send them to you, then you never reply.
Because sometimes they end up in an unsanctioned segment.
Yeah, sometimes.
Spoiler alert: we're not doing that segment today.
Today is not one of those days.
No, but there are some things on this list that you definitely sent me.
Yep.
One of which is these NanoLeaf LED display cases that are way too expensive.
Yes, they are. They're like, what is it, like $300 for 6, maybe?
Yeah, that's about right. It's like $300 for 6 of them, but you can like kit it out to something like $20,000 worth of these. Like,
well, because they said you can stack like 300 of them.
Yeah. How big are these roughly? They're like 2 feet by 1 foot roughly.
One picture so basically what this is a lighted display case that you could use to show off various things. And I sent it to you because Petapixel showed it being used to show off cameras, which I thought that was kind of cool.
Very clever.
But to give people an idea of the size, I saw an example of it being used to show off sneakers because, some people are really into shoes.
That makes sense.
And it's about that size. So like if you had like a high top sneaker, it would fit in there, but there wouldn't be a whole lot of extra room past that.
Is it worth explaining what NanoLeaf is?
I mean, I think people can look it up, but it's basically just smart home lighting stuff.
But they're like ridiculous. Like the original NanoLeaf, it's like they're almost like triangles. And then you just shape the triangles on your wall in whatever shape you want. And then you can have them like react to sound. And so they just like light up whenever someone closes a door or walks into a room. I
always thought they were really cool. I always wanted to get them, but I never did because I never felt like I could justify the cost. And I think, kind of oddly, like our photo frame segment a few weeks ago, For some reason, your office has some of those.
Yeah, our office does have Nanoleaf.
Yeah, and you're not a fan,
They're
right?
just a little ridiculous because it used to be, there was a period of time whenever they would like update or lose connection, and whenever they fail, they just go bright white.
That's probably not a good
And
failure
it's just
mode.
like all white, lighting up the whole place.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do that anymore. Now they just like, I think for like the last year, they've been perfectly well behaved.
Well, that's good.
Yep, and like making the movement whenever you walk past them, they light up or whatever. It's a bit silly. It's kind of artistic. I guess I don't want to say they're cool. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. I'm just, your dad will think they're cool. Not your dad, but like your dad, you know?
Yeah.
My dad would probably like them. Wouldn't my dad like them? Have I missed an opportunity to give my dad Nanoleaf?
That's a good question.
Where
Maybe you should get him some of these Nanoleaf display cases so that he can display his Nikon collection in these light up cases.
I think he would love that.
I feel like you would. I feel like you should get these for your film cameras.
I think that would be cool, but also, I don't know. I'd have to like figure out how to display them properly. It would be neat though.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought this product was kind of cool, honestly. Like, it's a unique thing. You don't really see, like, I mean, I'm sure display cases exist, but like having them all be like networked together to where they can all be the same color and stuff, and just having it be a simple product you can buy and use without having to figure that all out yourself. Like, I think it's kind of cool.
I think the networking of it is what deters me the most.
Yeah.
That I've been reconfiguring all the Hue stuff in my house, and that's just exhausting. Like, oh, this switch does this, and like they rolled out new features, and I have to like reconfigure everything, and everything. Nothing's ever the right color at the right time, and it's just like a lot.
Yeah, the smart home stuff can be exhausting.
It reminds me that there's an Apple TV on my doorstep right now.
That's a weird place to keep your Apple TV. Should probably bring that inside.
I had to buy an Apple TV so that I can control my lights.
Yeah, obviously. That's how that works. So,
Well, more of that, so my wife can control our lights without,
yes.
and yeah, because they rolled out an update and they didn't tell you like, oh, if you update HomeKit to whatever, then you can't. Only one person can control your lights or whatever your home, because Apple thinks that everybody lives alone and only has one iPhone. I don't
kind of a weird perspective.
I don't understand why Apple doesn't know that families exist.
I think that what it is they think that everyone who's bought in on Apple has an Apple TV or a HomePod.
It's ridiculous. It feels like the most excessive version of an Apple tax.
It kind of does.
Of like,
yeah.
Oh, you want this home stuff to work? You have to buy that. I get it. I get the fact that it runs locally. I like that it runs locally. And I get that, well, so if your phone's not in the house, how's it supposed to run if your phone's not there to run it? It's like, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Sell a home hub. Sell like a stupid freaking puck that I can connect to my router. Costs $50. Don't make me buy a HomePod. Don't make me buy an Apple TV.
Yep. And here you are.
I bought it used on eBay so that I didn't have to give Apple any money. I went around their rules. So I'm gonna have because I wanted Threads, I have like a 3rd gen 4K Apple TV that's going to sit in my closet next to my router.
I think you should hook it up to your TV and use it. You see Google just discontinued the Chromecast?
Yeah.
I mean, now you've got a new streaming box you can use.
But I can't, part of the whole deal with the Chromecast is that I can just play my my Google Photos will just play on the TV.
Can't do that with the Apple TV.
I like the Chromecast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's Google's MO though, right? You like it, so they killed it.
Yeah, well, they're going to replace it with like another thing, which I will probably get that thing.
Yep.
Whenever they give it to me for free.
Yeah, because you don't pay for stuff like that.
Yeah, they're going to like fire sale that thing in about a month. Black Friday's going to roll around. It's going to be $20. I'm going to buy one.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
I think by the time this episode releases, the Olympics will probably be over.
Yeah, I think so.
But have you watched any of the Olympics?
I've seen a bunch of memes about the Olympics. I don't know if that counts. But yeah, I've seen some bits here and there.
I'll allow it.
Yeah.
I've watched some of the Olympics.
Are there specific events that you particularly like? Or you just watch generic Olympics?
I just kind of like watch what was happening. I've been wanting to go back and watch the triathlon, but I subscribed to Peacock just for this whole situation.
Wow.
And they're actually doing a good job.
Huh.
Like you can watch whatever event you want, or you can watch the primetime stuff, or you can catch replays. You can like see only the gold medal things. That's all like on demand.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's legitimately not bad, which was super, super surprising.
This has been an interesting Olympics to watch, just because they're like the current online world with like how people share memes and all that has made it like, it's just an interesting social commentary to see how like the online world is experiencing the Olympics. And I don't know, it's been kind of enjoyable just seeing that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the whole like TikTokification of the Olympics has been really interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of fun memes coming out of it. Point is though, sometimes you get like shots of the photographers and things.
Mm-hmm.
And get to that in a second. What really annoys me about the broadcast stuff for the Olympics is how tight they get. Like, I don't get it.
You think it's too tight?
They'll start with like a medium shot, and they're like, here's your Olympian. You got your shoulders, top of the head, and then they just start slow zooming, and they don't stop. Like, they'll get in, so it's like you can see their eyes and their nose and like their top lip, and they'll hold it for like 30 seconds.
They're trying to humanize the people so you can see every pore on their face.
It's so close. Like, I'm like guarantee they're using those like 70-pound Fuji lenses or something like that.
I'm sure they are.
It's just it's a little much, but sometimes you get glimpses of the photographers, which looks insane because it's like, here's the photographer people where they're sitting, and it's like 20 people with cameras.
Yep.
And I'm like, why? There's like one person from each country, from each publication. Like you and your, like, why do we have so many people taking pictures? I don't get it. But they all look the same. They're all wearing the same like stupid vest. And it made me wonder, what is this vest? And so I couldn't find what vest they're wearing this year. But last Olympics, they were all wearing the Tiffin Domke photo vest, I think is what it's called. Yeah, like, is that how you pronounce it? It's Domke.
Yeah, I have no idea.
The
I don't know language that is.
Domke Photogs vest. And I feel like I need to buy one of these things because I don't think I'm a real photographer because I don't have a khaki vest.
Have you ever used a khaki vest like that?
No.
It's so useful. You have pockets just right in front of you. I mean, I think they're great.
This thing's like $130.
Yeah, it's pretty high.
It's got mesh, like ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
It has like pockets basically all the way around it. So you can like reach behind you, reach in front of you for like your filters and your lenses. And some of them have zippers. It's crazy.
I feel like you can probably get a fishing vest for cheaper than that. And it's basically the same thing.
Well, I mean, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never like rocked a photo vest. And
you could be missing out.
I can't tell if it's, hey, you have to wear this because it's like the garb for the Olympic photographer. Like all the Olympic people generally wear the same type of outfit for most of the sports. And if you're shooting in photography at the Olympics, you have to wear the vest.
It could be just for like ease of identifying them or something.
Yeah. So maybe that.
Like I don't know about you, but I mean, if I went to the Olympics and I was, a photographer at the Olympics, they might confuse me for one of the athletes.
Oh, guaranteed.
And so, I mean, you got to make sure, like, that could be really awkward,
Oh, yeah. They're like trying to push you out onto a pommel horse or something.
Yeah. And you're like, no, I'm taking pictures right now. I can't do that. Like, if you're wearing the vest and then just
don't you see the camera in my hands? They're like, no.
Yeah.
But if you're wearing the vest.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course. They're all wearing them, though. And so I'm like, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Am I missing a trick here? Like, do I need one of these vests?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that it would just level up your photography game.
I mean, we shoot events sometimes. Like I could fit like at least 2 lenses in this thing. And
well, I don't know. How many times have we been, your bag is in the other room and you're going and shooting this thing and you think, oh man, I really need my ND right now. It could just be in a pocket on that vest.
The pictures that they have on their website for this are horrible. Look how flattering that is. It looks like that woman is wearing a box.
Yeah, I don't think you're wearing this to impress anybody.
She also has a Canon with what looks like a 150 to 500 just like hanging on her neck, not touching the camera. Just like free hanging.
Yeah, that's her workout. Getting some exercise in there. There's another one of a guy on a literal safari using that vest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. What do you think, Daniel? I have to have one of these, right? to be like a real photographer.
I feel like for sure when you're 55 years old shooting Nikon with a super zoom, at that point, you absolutely have to have one. And by the way, if your dad doesn't have one of these, you should get that as a gift for him before you get the Nanoleaf stuff.
That's actually where I was going to go with this.
He would for sure use it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I don't know. I personally, I don't think I'd be able to bring myself to wear it for like casual events, because I know people would see me be like, oh, look at him trying to be all cool and photographer guy. And I don't want to be that person, but I think there are cases where it'd be useful. I mean, like if you're on a literal safari, I think you can get away with wearing the vest.
I have 2 points here. One, we've talked about how if you put a matte box on your camera, you're legit.
True.
The vest is the same thing.
You think so?
Yeah. Second thing, you may not know this. My dad, big vest guy. This will work out well.
I've never understood vests, because I'm like, why wouldn't you want your arms to also be warm? You know, like when it's cold outside, I want everything to be warm. I'm wearing a jacket, gloves. I've got, like some nice pants on.
Look. Have you ever been sleeping and you're like, I'm a little warm, but I'm not that warm, so you put one leg out?
I don't like that either. I don't.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's not.
Well, then it's not for you.
I'm a holistic temperature person. Like everything's got to be the same temperature.
Vests are for the one leg out of the covers people. And it's okay that that's not you. That is my dad. Probably. I don't know that for sure. But
you don't know how your dad sleeps and what his orientation of legs in the bed is? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is, I think that if you drew a Venn diagram of one leg out of the bed and vest people, perfect circle.
Well, I for one can't wait for your dad's next Christmas/birthday when he gets this awesome vest and some like lighted display cases to show off all his camera gear. That's going to be a big day.
I'm going to put these on a list. It's going to blow his mind. He won't even know what he's been missing. Okay.
On that note,
have you ever heard of Panomicron?
So I don't remember if I sent this to you or not. And if I sent it to you, it's going to sound bad if I say no, but no, I don't think I've heard of them.
You didn't necessarily send this to me. You sent me an Instagram reel that was probably a TikTok of someone using a 3D printed 4.5 camera.
Okay. Yes. That's why this sounds familiar.
And the person whose print that they used they downloaded they didn't make it themselves, right? So like they downloaded the files and they printed it. And then, so they made the camera themselves. They didn't design the camera.
Sure.
Panomicron is somebody who designs 3D printed cameras. Used to sell them, doesn't do it anymore, but still makes the designs available.
Oh, interesting.
So you can go to their website, and there's like quite a few different, really interesting looking designs.
Yeah.
A few different lens mount options, but it's like legitimately a 3D printed film camera and with like multiple different formats. And I think this is super stinking cool.
So what really surprises me about this is it doesn't look like you have to pay for the files.
I don't think so, no.
Like I clicked on download and it's just like, here's a zip.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't expecting that.
Yep.
I guess
this 4.5 Polaroid or something.
You must need more things, right? Like you need a lens and...
Well, yeah, like you're going to have to get the lens, and that's going to have to be most of these are I don't know, say like Pentax or whatever. Like, actually, maybe I don't think they were Leica. Anyways, they're old like film mounts, depending on the thing, and I don't remember which is which. But like, there's like a Google Doc, and it shows you how to assemble the whole thing and like what to print.
That is super cool.
And I think it's awesome.
Lucas, our listeners don't know this, but there currently, right now, there is a 3D printer like 7 feet away from you.
All I'm saying is that I thought you cared about me.
I think we need to make this happen. I think you should get me to 3D print you a large format or medium format, whatever, film camera. And I think it'd be cool.
I also think it would be cool. More to come on that. I'm just going to put the pin in it right there. And I'm going to dig into... This could be how I get into medium format, Daniel.
It could.
Like, finally.
You figure out which of those ones you want, and I'll print it for you.
Oh, my gosh. So I'm thinking about this for a minute. I'm wondering if, like, different materials have different light bleeds.
Well, I bet they do, yeah. But they may have suggestions, too, on, like, how to print it or whatever. I'll have to look and see.
Oh, boy. This is going to be a segment.
Yep, for sure.
Will it fall into the film journey segment, or is there going to be a whole new unsanctioned segment?
I feel like it's sort of film journey adjacent.
I like a fork in the path.
Yeah. Oh, man. That sounds meaningful for your life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's call it the road less traveled.
Yeah, I think 3D printing a film camera is definitely the road less traveled.
Oh,
for sure counts.
Speaking of film cameras, the other link that you sent me in not a sanctioned segment, Rolly 35 pre-orders are imminent.
I was thinking you'd probably already seen this when I sent it to you.
I'm a really busy guy, Daniel. You don't even know. You don't even know half the stuff. But we've been talking about this, right? These what is it? It's what's the name of that company, Daniel? It's not Moment. It's
I mean, I sent you the link. I can't remember. I feel like we're both going Mint.
Thank you, Mint. I knew it started with an M. Jeez, because like they do all the camera restoring stuff. Anyways, they've been working on this for like years.
Yep.
Years.
And we talked about it earlier this summer, I think.
Yeah, I think there was a few different episodes. We've kind of been updating on like where they are on the development of this thing, like when is it coming out. Like it's supposed to have like autofocus, auto exposure. This thing's gonna be legit.
Pretty big deal.
It's gonna be here. So they're quoting out at $800, and they're saying that they're trying to ramp up for production. Product's done. Pre-orders are going to be like sometime late August, and they're hoping to ship, I think, or maybe it was like early September for pre-orders, and then they're going to ship ideally sometime in October.
Interesting. That's right around the corner.
It's right around the corner.
So $800 is pretty high.
It's a bit steep. I still think that I'm more kind of just right now inclined to go and still get a Pentax half frame.
Yeah, I was going to ask what you were thinking there, because you seemed interested in this before.
It's
but
like
it's a pretty high price.
Way cheaper, but this Rolly 35 looks so awesome.
Yeah, it does.
It is one of the smallest film cameras that existed back then, and like coming out now, there's like reusing the same body style design. It has the classic like 2 dials in the front, where one is where you can set like your like what kind of film you're using, where it's like color negative, and set your speed, and then on the other side you can set like your shutter speed and your, I guess not your ISO, whatever. It's like your exposure compensation, your shutter speed on the other side. But like the 2 dials, they don't fit on top. They sit down on the front, right next to the lens. So it looks like you have like 3 circles right next to each other. And it's like this super little tiny thing. Yeah. It looks really cool. It's really, really small. And this is going to be like, it's going to be one of the very few brand new film cameras that are releasing again.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing with this stuff is you never know, like once they do that first production run, you never know how many more there are going to be. Will they ever produce more of them? It's probably some sort of limited availability thing.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I can't imagine them like making this forever. Mint is not Pentax. They're not going to like just keep rolling these things out. They're very much we make bespoke and restore like old film cameras. Yeah. And this is kind of a unique project in that they're releasing this thing. And so it does feel like a now or never situation on if you want a brand new Rolly 35 with autofocus. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see some reviews.
It's full frame. It's got like an f2.8 lens on it. This thing's going to be legit. It's like a rangefinder, right? So it's like look through neck. It's perfect. Probably. I don't know. Then maybe it comes out as a piece of junk.
Yeah. Well,
an $800 piece of junk.
Let's hope not.
Yes, let's hope not. Okay. There's like no more information, right?
Yeah.
So like we see pictures out of it in hand or whatever. But we're getting closer. We're like right around the corner. I'm like so pumped. Okay. I have another thing for you, and I wrote down something, and now I'm trying to find where that link is. Please stand by. Just go ahead and like vamp for like 2 minutes here, Daniel.
This would be a perfect time for a sponsor segment if we had such a thing, but we don't.
Just work on that.
just do it live.
Yeah, just go ahead and call somebody up right now.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I got a little kind of caught in the weeds on like what a voice coil motor is last week, and I was like, I should like write that down or like get a little more information on like what a voice coil motor is. And so I did look it up, and it's basically like a non-commutated like linear actuator or whatever. And so it's like a magnet with coils around it within another magnet, and then you can precisely like move it in and out, and there's no friction because it's magnets and coils, and so like nothing's touching each other.
Sure.
You can like precisely move things forward and backwards. So it's not like a gear deal. It's basically like a linear electric solenoid with induction.
I mean, that's kind of cool.
But it's they use them for like medical equipment very frequently. It's not like a new technology.
Yeah.
I think that you more commonly just hear them as like non-commutated DC linear motors or direct drive.
Well, I hear that all the time.
Yeah, or like direct drive linear motors. And so my main point of bringing this up is, besides like just kind of voice coil motors is just kind of another term for it. And so like maybe VCM for Canon, but it's called just like a linear motor for somebody else. And so probably the same thing. I'm just surprised that Canon didn't choose to call them like a NCDCLDDLM or something like that.
Yeah, I'm also surprised. I can't imagine why they wouldn't have used that name.
They love those letters on those lenses. And it feels like if you could call it like an NCDCDDLM, it would be way more prestigious than like a VCM.
You think so?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, all the YouTubers that are going to review that lens are thankful that Canon did not name it that.
I would have given me endless joy just watching people stumble over 26 alphabet soup characters.
Did you happen to find any information about whether that type of motor is like, is it, I mean, if it's used for medical equipment, that seems like it must be pretty precise and stuff, but is it any better for autofocus than any other type of motor?
Yeah. So the advantage of using this kind of actuator or solenoid or however you want to call it, you can get micron level precision out of it to have it move between 2 points and be extremely accurate, which is exactly what you need for a lens.
Sure. And then, probably less vibration too, right?
Right, because there's no friction, because it's essentially like a floating element within an element. And so they're extremely accurate. They can be very fast, and they have depending upon like how many coils and how you configure it, they can have a very good like weight ratio to power ratio kind of thing. So they can move heavy elements quickly within micron precision.
Yeah, I bet it's quiet too.
Yep. Yeah, so that's kind of like the big appeal for something like this for a lens versus something like a stepping motor or something that's geared, is that it's going to be able to make those movements very quickly and very quietly and smoothly.
It's got to be more complicated and more expensive though.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So always a trade-off.
Most of like the images of these things that I've seen, they're almost like a cylinder type thing, and I guess you could probably have like really small ones kind of on the edges to push your glass around. The other thing is range, like something like this versus certain other types of solenoids. You can get maybe like a 5x range on something like a voice coil, and that way you can get more movement if you have like large distances to move to make your focal lengths work.
Interesting.
But I'm just wondering, like, how do they fit in the lens? How much cost it adds? That I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder that about every lens. Like, yeah, even any kind of motor, it's impressive that they're able to fit that stuff inside a lens without them being, huge.
Isn't it like a lot of old DSLRs had the motor drive in the body instead? And so
Nikon particularly did that. And if you got a cheap Nikon camera like the D40, it didn't have that motor in there. And so some of Nikon's newer lenses had the motor in the lens. And so with those lenses, you could get autofocus. But if you had like an old Nifty 50 or something, it was designed where like the camera would drive the lens using a motor built into the body.
That's wild.
Yeah, yeah. But, it's
I guess that
clever.
makes the lenses cheaper.
Cheaper and lighter. I mean, it's kind of a clever way to do it.
It is interesting. I wonder if that creates more failure point, or if that's like less. That seems like it would be less precise than in lens control, because you're closer to the control point in the element at that point.
I would bet so, but I mean, it's probably hard to separate that variable from all the other variables that have changed. I mean, everything's just gotten a lot better, I think, as far as focusing quickly and stuff. So
definitely better. So that was just kind of closing the loop on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. A few more. Actually, it's really just two more big things here. This is kind of more of the big topic. So the Z6 is in people's hands.
The Z6 Mark III specifically.
Thank you. The Z6 Mark III, the Nikon Z6 Mark III.
You have to say their name a bunch of times, you have to say Nikon 3 times to make it a NikonCast.
Just like a Beetlejuice situation. Yep. It was in my dad's hands probably before anybody else's. Just throwing that out there. Humble brag, I guess. I don't know. So like actual reviews have been hitting. People have been able to just like get camera in hand. They're running tests. They're doing like dynamic range tests and all this sort of thing.
Right.
And one thing that's come up is this like flicker issue. And I went kind of deep on this. I feel like I could have gone deeper, Daniel. But I was like, this might be too much. And so We're going to go like slightly less than surface level, but not any deeper than that. But I do want to talk about this issue that's been coming up. And it's not just Petapixel that made note of it. There was a few other outlets, and then particularly, what was his name again? Horcrux or something?
It was like Rorschach, right? Horshark?
Yeah, Horshack. Yeah, on the DP Review forum, he did a lot of testing and posted a few YouTube videos that were pretty concise as far as showing the problem. And so we'll link to those, but I kind of wanted to talk through like what is happening with the Z6 Mark III right now. Do you know what's happening?
I saw kind of like a meta discussion about this, and what I saw was people saying that it feels like with some of these modern cameras that they're willing to forego a little bit on image quality to get other features, which I think we've actually maybe mentioned a few times on this podcast, but that's a pretty bold statement to make. I don't know if the stuff you're talking about is in that realm or not, but that was kind of like a larger commentary I was seeing.
I do think that it is always the case that there's a push and a pull. We frequently see that, even especially with like the newer stack sensors that are coming out, loss in dynamic range for speed and that sort of thing. I mean, it kind of felt like with the XH2S, you got it back in video and it wasn't really too much of a loss in photo. But for some of the full frame stuff, it seemed like in electronic shutter, especially if like you were only able to read 12-bit due to speed, you were losing some image quality.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the cool thing about the R5 Mark II from Canon was it's basically the same image quality from the mechanical and electronic shutter. And you're not really losing too much for the stacked, but also like people will only use those cameras for 2 hours. So we don't actually know.
So, but like more specifically, what is happening with the Z6 Mark III?
Okay, so people are saying that if you shoot video, this isn't so much a problem with photo, but if you shoot video and in your darkest of shadows, so if you're shooting like a really high contrast scene,
in your darkest of shadows, makes it sound like you're having a really bad day while you're using that camera.
Sure, yeah. If you're shooting a high contrast scene, so if you just shoot low light, not necessarily if you shoot bright light, whatever, but if you have those brights and you have the dark, so you have your sensor is really having to, or the camera's really having to struggle for that full range. If you bring up your shadows at all, like the very black, your black level shadows.
Yes, your darkest of shadows.
Your darkest of shadows. There's like what appears to be some sort of flickering. Like you look down there and it looks like it's like the exposure is changing.
Wait, so you're talking about like live view in a recorded video, like what?
In a recorded video that doesn't have in-camera noise reduction applied.
Okay.
So if you're shooting in log or raw, they're in like your black point level shadows. In some cases, high dynamic range, you're seeing flickering.
That doesn't sound good.
But it's only on the shadow parts, and it looks like flickering, but it's like something else. And so digging into this deeper, there's been a few different back comparisons with like the Z8 and the Z6 Mark III about noise. There's also I've seen some comparisons with like the S5 Mark II from Lumix and the Z6 Mark III from Nikon for like a noise comparison. And the Nikon in video is, for the Z6 Mark III, is noticeably noisier. Like the low end noise looks to be almost a stop noisier in general compared to something like the Z8. And like your low ISO stuff is fine, but whenever you start getting into higher ISO, like if you compared 5,000 to 5,000 between the Z8 and the Z6 Mark III, the Z8 is noticeably cleaner. And then you bump it to 6400 and it cleans up because that's the dual base ISO, and then you push again, and the Z8 holds clean better. And also, if you push the shadows, the Z8's shadows hold up way better too. And so it seems to be like something going on with the sensor in the Z6 Mark III and like how it's handling that noise.
Yeah.
And so what Horshack did, and he posted this video, is he like put a lot of this stuff in scopes in DaVinci Resolve and like isolated some of the areas. And what it looks like is happening is in those dark shadows, because it like, there's not a lot of information, like there's just not a lot of light, right? So it's kind of like making things up. That's where noise is coming from, right? It's just not enough sensitivity. It is switching between like magenta favored image and green favored image. So like you ever like look at noise in an image and like you can get that color noise, right? It's not just like grainy, but there's like speckled color noise because the camera doesn't know what color the pixels are supposed to be, and so you see like magenta or green or whatever like colors popping.
Right.
It's like that, but it's shifting back and forth between magenta and green.
Oh, that's weird.
And it's not doing it regularly. If it was doing it regularly, it would just kind of look like noise and basically fade out and it wouldn't flicker. But because it's an irregular shift, it's not every frame, it looks like a visible flicker, because what's happening is like if you look at the like an exposure on a waveform or a vector scope, you can kind of see like how the noise is moving around and it's like shifting between these two colors, and the result of that shifting makes it look like the exposure is changing.
It seems really bad.
Yeah, like it's not great. If you run noise reduction or if you run deflicker in Resolve, it pretty much cleans it up totally.
Yeah, well, that's good at least. And you said it only happens if you don't have in-camera noise reduction turned on. Right.
Right. So if you're shooting in log or raw, this may come up.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty big bug to me.
I mean, it's but we don't know if it's a bug or not. Like we don't know if it's a bug or if it's a sensor problem. And so people have been like throwing around a lot of different theories on like why this is happening. Some people think, or one theory that I saw was that maybe it's like a thermal thing where the pathway that you're reading off the sensor or how it's reading off the sensor is being either like gated or slowed down due to like thermal reasons off the chip. Another theory that I saw was that Nikon used to use like a split direction mechanism for their like how they read off the sensor, basically to read faster instead of just like dumping to RAM on one side. You like dump to this RAM on this side, now dump to the RAM on the other side, and kind of just split the direction that you're pulling off the sensor in order to pull off faster.
Weird.
And so one of the guesses is like, what if you just have like enough difference in these like really edge cases where you just don't have enough light, and so it's like super noisy shadows, and so like this set of the images is magenta and this set of the images is green.
That's strange though.
But
it's weird. Like, I see what you're saying, where it's like if there's two different processing pipelines, maybe they make a different decision, and then when they get combined back, you get a weird result. But it's surprising to me they wouldn't fix that problem. Like that feels pretty noticeable to me.
It is kind of strange. And so I know that Petapixel had reached out to Nikon and said, can you comment on it? And there haven't been any response as of yet, at least whenever we're recording this, but I am curious to see what Nikon finds out and like what they determine. I think they're just kind of like on vacation or something whenever that question went, like literally they're on vacation whenever that question went in. But
they're all at the Olympics.
Like TBD, there's a lot of theories on, there's a lot of different things that could be happening that this could be a hardware thing. One person said maybe in order to get the stack thing to go faster, half the sensor is BSI and half the sensor is FSI, and they're like mixing the technologies. And I'm like, that I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
because if both sides are illuminated, as long as you have circuitry on both sides, then where does the pixels go?
Where do the pixels go? It's a great question.
Maybe I just don't understand how that works. Anyways, point is noisier sensor, and in high dynamic range situations, in non-noise reduced images, log and nlog or nraw, there is potentially issues in the shadow. They can be resolved with some like deflickering and noise reduction, but it's just extra work in post, basically. Yeah.
And it's only going to affect you if you shoot video. If you shoot photo, you'd never notice it.
Right. But on the photo side, still noisier. Like it's kind of the same thing. So like
I feel like I can accept noisier because it's a much cheaper camera than the Z8.
Sure.
And so it's like, in some sense you get what you pay for. Now maybe maybe it's like, should they have been more clear about that? But what are they going to say? The Z6 is noisier than the Z8. I mean, that doesn't strike me as too big of a deal. Yeah.
So like, it's not as bad because in video, you're going to be pulling off the sensor at a 12-bit readout. In photo, you're going to be pulling off at a 14-bit readout. And just by virtue of having that additional like data off the sensor, you're going to be able to have less noise and you're going to be able to have more dynamic range.
Right.
And so it's going to be less of an issue on the photo side. But we are seeing that we get a little more noise and there's a reduction in dynamic range on the photo side. And like it's not bad, but it's not great. So for the Z6 Mark III, if you're shooting above 800 ISO and you're looking at the dynamic range like in 800 and above, it's basically on par with the Z6 Mark II and other cameras in that price point. So like you're looking at call it like 9 exposures up or down that you could vary. Anything above like lower than 800 on those lower ISOs, it's essentially a stop worse than the outgoing Z6 Mark II. And then it's like one or two stops worse than like the Z8.
Yeah.
And so this like it's still a really cool, really competitive, really fast camera that can do a lot of cool stuff with like the uncropped 4K oversampled or 4K oversampled 60p video and all this cool stuff. But like you just don't have the dynamic range on this thing just because of the way that they're doing the sensor.
Well, and that may have been some of the discussion I was seeing where it's like they added all these really cool features, but if all you care about is image quality, it's not like they've made compromises for that. And for some people that may be a problem. I mean, if all you do is shoot, normal photos, you do portraits or whatever, then you probably care more about image quality than you do about, image quality, dynamic range. You probably care more about those things than you do about a fast sensor readout speed.
For sure. And I think that a lot of this is just as a result of this switch to stack sensors. I think that the stack stuff is great. And for me, it seems like a good compromise. But I mean, if you go back and you look at like the Z7 Mark II and you compare it to something like the Z9, you're going to be about a stop better in exposure for anything under 800 ISO.
Right.
And then you go to the Z6 Mark III and it's another stop. So it's like we are losing something with these really fast sensors. And it's interesting that you kind of have to decide like whether or not that's reasonable for you and like your workflow or whatever.
Yeah, it is.
So that's kind of the main thing I want to talk about was like this whole controversy with the flickering shadows. It does seem like the consensus is maybe it's fine and maybe it's an edge case, and if you don't shoot video it's probably not a problem, and that like maybe they can fix it in firmware. But it's kind of like you now have to know that there's this gotcha with the Z6 Mark III, which when it released, it seemed like this was going to be the best hybrid camera in that price point because of how good the video features are. And now there's a caveat.
I feel like that's been the story for almost every camera that's come out lately, and it's kind of a reminder to not take all of the marketing at face value because again, nobody's going to point out, shortcomings in their marketing. And you also see all these cases like with Canon with that R5 Mark II where, they just let people use it for a couple of hours. And regardless, whenever you see most YouTubers review cameras, they haven't used it for very long. Like they may not have seen some of these things. And it just seems like we've had so many instances lately where there's been a camera that's really cool on the surface and legitimately is really good in a lot of ways. But there are some caveats that you have to be aware of that don't come out until later, and it ends up being like a totally separate news story from the release of the camera. And I'm not saying that's bad. I think most industries are that way, but it is kind of something to keep in mind that like anytime you're buying a camera, it's never going to be all good. There's always going to be things like this, and you have to wait for that information to come out and decide, is this a problem for me or not?
Unless it's Fujifilm. Then you can't wait because you'll never be able to buy it.
I was thinking that too as I said it. But Fuji's not immune from this either. I mean, they had those things with the GFX, the Deuce.
Yep.
Where the, it's like, oops, actually, it only reads at 12-bit in these certain cases. So it's affecting everybody.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few more things I wanted to note on the Z6 that just kind of digging through some of the stuff that came up. I think that there maybe was some discussion on whether or not it has an anti-aliasing filter. It does have an anti-aliasing filter, but I think that what Nikon was saying was like, but it's like not that bad or whatever.
I don't know if you can just like, can that be not that bad?
So I think like what they've commonly done in the past and probably what they're doing here is doing a single direction anti-aliasing filter. So do it only like in the horizontal direction rather than like horizontal and vertical. And so that it's like cutting some of that moire, but not all of it, with the idea that most of the light's probably coming in randomly anyway.
Interesting.
And so you can kind of like get some of the advantage of the AA filter without causing too much softness.
Yeah.
It seems like the viewfinder, which is HDR capable, only does HDR when you're shooting an HLG. And when you shoot an HLG, it locks you out at 400 ISO.
Like you can't change the ISO at all?
No, you just can't go below 400.
Oh, okay.
But also people are saying that it's just because it needs the width, like that much dynamic range.
Sure.
And that it's the same as shooting at base ISO and you're not getting a noise hit. But I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. Another weird little caveat though. Right?
There were some measured speeds for the sensor. So we had a little bit of back and forth on like how fast is the sensor on the Z6 Mark III, et cetera, et cetera. And it looks like if you're shooting 6K, it's about a 9.3 millisecond readout speed. If you're shooting 4K oversampled from 6K, exactly the same. If you're going to shoot 1080p, you can get it down to 2.76 milliseconds. If you're shooting line skip 1080p, which is kind of nuts.
That's fast.
That's probably like the 240 line skip stuff. And if you're shooting 14-bit RAW, that's a 14.4 readout speed, which is decent. And then if you're going to shoot 12-bit JPEGs, that's an 11 millisecond readout speed.
I mean, it seems like it is indeed pretty fast.
Yep, it is really fast. And did I mention NRAW? NRAW is roughly the same 9.37 milliseconds. So you're basically getting under 10 unless you're shooting 14-bit RAW.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
It's very quick. So really cool to see. This camera does not have a mechanical shutter? I can't remember.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
cool. So those were all the updates that I have on the Z6 Mark III that I think were worth talking about now. And I guess we'll just keep kind of seeing how that release goes.
Yeah.
But with all the digging into the Z6 Mark III, and kind of mentioning it a few weeks ago, I've been thinking more about the Nikon D850.
As one does.
Yep. Just kind of casually. And I had mentioned that, this was probably the ultimate, peak, pinnacle, whatever DSLR.
I do remember you saying that.
It's not the latest or the most expensive DSLR. Canon did come out with the D6 in like 2020. The D6 Mark III came out in like 2017. I think the 1DX Mark II from Canon came out in like 2020 also, ? But those, like the D6 and the 1DX Mark II, 3 are like sports cameras that shoot like 15 frames per second and have a crazy slapping mirror and 20 megapixels or whatever. And so I decided that I was going to convince you that you need to buy a D850.
I don't think you're going to be successful, but you're welcome to try.
Yeah, but maybe we can talk a little bit about why, whether or not there's a reason to like shoot a DSLR versus mirrorless nowadays, and whether or not the advantages of mirrorless have gotten to the point where it really doesn't make sense to shoot with a DSLR.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious to get to that. And I kind of want to start with the dynamic range. You can get like up to 14 EV on a Nikon D850.
Which is pretty good.
We were just talking about the Z6 being in like the 9.5 range and the Z7 Mark II being in like the 11.5, 12 range, and the Z9 being like the 10 range. It's just way better on that 850. You shoot this thing at like 64 base ISO, which is like crazy low noise, and you get all the dynamic range in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's sort of like how mirrorless sensors haven't really caught up to film. I guess it's kind of the same thing where, DSLR technology is still just really good. It's
like from an image quality standpoint, the sensor in this thing is, it was like it's highly competitive with the Z7 Mark II when it came out. And we're only now with some of the newer cameras like the Z8 finally seeing things that have better image quality.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Honestly, most of the image quality bump seems to be from the lenses rather than the sensor. You have that way shorter flange distance, and the new mirrorless lenses that these companies are coming out with are just so good compared to like the old, FD lenses or whatever. They're not FD, F-mount lenses. Like you compare like an 85 or a 50 from like F-mount to a modern like Z-mount version, and just the chromatic aberration and the color fringing and the sharpness it's just not there when you compare the two. The Z's are just so much sharper.
Yeah.
I know, it's kind of interesting. It feels like when you start getting into comparison, most of it just comes into like the character conversation and what do you want out of your photos more than anything. And I think it's really funny, like looking at photos and things off of a D850, it becomes really obvious that the lenses are limited in how much they can actually resolve. And it's interesting to see like you can have IBIS in DSLRs. Like I don't even know how you would necessarily.
Yeah.
I guess you could do IBIS, but like they just the D850 doesn't have IBIS.
Yeah.
And the mirror slap is like legit. And so it's like you have this camera, and if you aren't super skilled in like high shutter speeds or like keeping it stable, I mean, just the lens, the shake from taking a picture is noticeable in the frame. Like you start pixel peeping, and it's just like that's not as sharp as shooting with a no shutter Z9 because it's like you have all the movement.
Yeah, it's shaking the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So it's really interesting of just like the combination of IBIS and modern lens technology and flange distances has made images off of cameras look so much sharper and so much more detailed.
Yeah, even if they're even if the dynamic range isn't quite as good, it's like everything else is better.
Mm-hmm. But it's funny because it's like maybe the sensor itself is not that much better than it was 5 years ago, but just the mechanics around it have created a better image.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
The other fun things to think about of like maybe this is a reason to not go back to DSLR is just like how much autofocus has moved forward.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Like the concept of like tracking autofocus. Just like we talked about that for a long time on the Canon 1R1 and like all the tracking and the stuff, whatever. Like you just can't do that on a DSLR.
A lot of DSLRs only have like a very small number of autofocus points, and so that's one limitation. And then it's just they don't. Well, because they're not reading off the sensor, right? Like until you shoot the picture. So,
well, I mean, the D850 did have a lockup mode where you could shoot an electronic shutter. It would drop the mirror, and you could shoot with the back screen, which was a tilty screen.
Yep, so as all true photo cameras are.
Exactly, another huge win there. Team tilty screen. It can only do like 7 frames per second in photo, though.
That's pretty low, but also like I bet it's super loud.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
Like probably impressive for a DSLR.
Thing weighs like 2.2 pounds, like just the body.
Yeah, which is fine, I think, for what that would be used for.
It's just like this. It's substantial. I'm putting that in the win column.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem with that.
Another thing that has me really thinking about why I need a D850. It started out as you need a D850, but actually I need a D850. And the main reason is Nikon used to have this negative digitizer thing and it's like a mode on the D850. And for your macro lens, you buy this thing that goes on the end of the lens and it has like a filter on it to like soften light. And then you slide your negatives into the thing and you point it up to like a softbox or a light source. And then you just take the pictures of your negative and you slide the next one, you take the picture. And then
this would be perfect for you.
I know. And then in the camera, it does the negative conversion.
Oh, wow.
And then just have 45 megapixel JPEGs or RAWs or whatever of your that are already converted.
That sounds pretty ideal, honestly.
Sick. The Z cameras don't do this.
That's a shame.
And I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, why
Bring
not?
It back. So I have to buy a D850 just so I can get the negative conversion.
Oh, man. How much is the D850 going to cost you?
So right now you can buy one used for like $1,500.
Not
bad. I think you can still buy them new for like $2,500.
Oh, wow. I mean, $1,500 is not that bad.
No. There's people out there that are like, I'm never giving them a D850.
I bet.
It's so good. The best image quality.
Yeah.
Like just like the dynamic range and like 45 megapixel full frame for $1,500. You're going to get that anywhere else, Daniel.
It's really interesting how, in some ways things have really improved. Like you talked about all the advantages to mirrorless cameras. And I mean, new cameras are also a lot lighter weight. They're way better on video features. I don't even know if this can shoot video.
Oh, yeah. Daniel, it can shoot 4K 30.
And I mean, but things are just better now. But I mean, it's at the same time, like you have that, but then you look at some of these older, DSLRs, it's like stuff was still pretty good back then. Like in some ways you've come a long way. And in other ways, it's like we really haven't come as far as we think we have. Where
do you land on the viewfinder thing? Because I feel like that's the biggest thing when it comes to DSLR is you are giving up you're trading the ability to actually look through the lens, like legit look through the lens with the ability to have, like once the sensor is seeing everything, you can do your autofocusing and your AI and all this whatever, but you're not seeing the image. Like you're seeing the picture, for like what it's going to look like, but you're not seeing the image through the lens.
It's never been that big of a deal to me. I'm sure it would if I was a sports photographer. I mean, I've shot on a DSLR before, but I feel like I wasn't a very serious photographer back then, and so I don't know if I appreciated it as much as I would now. But I guess for me, the trade-off of everything you get on modern cameras, autofocus and all that, is worth it to where I'm willing to give that up. But I can see why for something like sports where you're trying to capture like the moment, I can see how it's valuable.
I kind of, before I started digging back into the D850, had just thought that, for a photographer, being able to see the image through the lens would be the peak, right? Like that's exactly what you want, is you want to see how everything's going to actually render. You want to see the lighting, and you want to be like looking actually at the image through the lens. And like, it didn't really occur to me too much as far as, well, with a mirrorless camera, you're actually seeing the picture, not seeing like the real world. But what that means is, like, if you have a high dynamic range scene, you look through the lens and like you may see a black subject, like they're totally cast in shadow, and not really have an idea of like how that's going to turn out.
Right.
Whereas if you shoot with mirrorless, you can see exactly how that exposure is going to hit before it hits.
That's a good point.
And so it like speeds up your workflow, because you're like similar to like the whole film thing of like shooting, you have to wait so long to see the picture. With mirrorless, you're seeing the picture before you even take it.
Yeah.
And so it's like closing that feedback loop faster and faster and faster as like the technology progresses. And so I've kind of like started to think, well, actually maybe the mirrorless way is better than the DSLR. Like, sure, you're not seeing the world as it's happening, but there's so many advantages that come with it.
It's kind of it's just two different sides of the coin. It can't really have both, I guess. And I don't know. I think it's interesting, but I prefer the mirrorless way. I mean, maybe it's just what I'm used to, but I like the advantages you get from that.
It just seems like the autofocus and like how good EVFs have gotten, and like the IBIS and the lens distances, like there's been so many amazing improvements just by the result of going mirrorless.
Yeah, I agree.
So the D850 was and still feels like peak camera.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a photographer's camera, right? Like,
I do wonder, you follow that track another 5 years, it feels like Nikon, or I mean even like Canon, could make a DSLR that still competes with mirrorless. Like, there's probably ways to do those focusing systems without having to expose the sensor. Maybe not as effective, and it would be a totally different track of development. But I do wonder or think that like there's probably a way and maybe room for a DSLR now.
Yeah,
that is as good as a mirrorless.
If anyone was going to do it, it would be Nikon.
I was thinking it was going to be Pentax.
Maybe them too. Yeah, but I mean, it feels like it's right up Nikon's alley in terms of Nikon shooters and what they care about. It'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah. So, did I convince you to go get a D850?
I don't think so. But I'd be interested to see this like super modern DSLR thing. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I do think that when D850s drop below $1,000,
that might be the time.
I'm going to get one to put it on my shelf.
Yeah, in one of your lighted display cases.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like if I could start collecting like a series of like, I don't want to say like legendary cameras, but like really significant cameras.
Yeah.
I feel like the Canon AE1 would go up there because it's just so ubiquitous as film cameras go.
Yeah.
But I feel like the D850 would also be on that list.
Yeah. That'd be a cool collection to build someday.
I would put an X100V up there. Not even though like maybe you're like, oh, well, you got to get the first one or whatever. But I feel like that camera hit with the version 5.
I think so too.
And like if you were going to grab like that one.
I agree.
And maybe like a Leica M6.
This would be a good segment to do in a future show, to think about like what would your like
what's like my top 10 Hall of Fame cameras or whatever.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Add that one to the list.
Yeah, we'll do that.
But this was a Nikon episode, so
this was definitely
can't be talking about all that.
Yeah, I can't even get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else is on this? There was something else that I was going to end on. I can't even remember what it was. Does it matter? Probably doesn't matter. Dana, what else you got?
I don't think I have anything else. I mean, how can I top the D850, right?
You can't.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us, and if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.